The doors were 300 meters tall. They were made from a metal that did not exist anywhere in human knowledge, and they had stood closed for 11,000 years against any species that had not been formally invited. Today, for the first time in galactic history, they opened for humanity. Ambassador David Webb stood at the entrance and felt very small. The chamber beyond was so massive that clouds had formed near its ceiling. Floating platforms stretched in every direction, each one holding delegates from worlds that humanity had never heard of. There were creatures made of living crystal. There were beings that existed as swirling patterns of light. There were massive insectoid figures with armored shells and flowing liquid entities contained in magnetic fields. 12,000 representatives from 900 worlds, and every single one of them had turned to look at the human who had just walked in. David kept his expression neutral. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat, but he had trained for this moment for 15 years. He was Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Council, and he would not show fear. A voice filled the chamber. It did not come from any visible source. It simply existed everywhere at once, resonating through the air and through David's bones. The Council recognizes the representative of Earth. You may approach the platform of judgment. David walked forward. The path beneath his feet was made of something that looked like solid light. It stretched across an impossible distance, suspended above a void that seemed to have no bottom. With each step, he felt the weight of alien eyes upon him. The platform of judgment was a circular disk at the exact center of the chamber. It was where species came to receive their official classification from the galactic community. Most new species were classified as developing, which meant they would receive guidance and protection from older civilizations. Some were classified as promising, which granted them limited trading rights. A rare few were classified as advanced, which gave them a voice in council decisions. David had read the reports. He knew what classification humanity was about to receive. He also knew that every alien in this chamber expected him to be terrified by it. They were about to be disappointed. Ambassador of Earth, the voice spoke again. David now understood it came from the Supreme Arbiter, an entity of pure energy that had governed the Council for millennia. The Galactic Threat Assessment Bureau has completed its evaluation of your homeworld. The results are unprecedented. A holographic display flickered to life above David's head. It showed Earth, small and blue and beautiful, spinning slowly in the darkness of space. Your planet has received the highest Terror Index score ever recorded. Your environment is classified as extremely hostile. Your native fauna includes thousands of apex predators. Your microbial ecosystem contains pathogens that could devastate 90% of known species. Your geological activity would be considered catastrophic on any other world. David said nothing. He simply listened. Furthermore, the Arbiter continued, your species has demonstrated behavioral patterns that the Bureau has classified as severely concerning. You have developed weapons capable of destroying your entire civilization. You have used these weapons against your own population. You have engaged in continuous warfare throughout your recorded history. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. David noticed that several delegates had moved their platforms further away from him. Based on these findings, the Council has classified Earth as the most terrifying planet in the known galaxy. This title was previously held by Nightmare Prime, homeworld of the Collective, for 9,000 consecutive cycles. A section of the chamber shifted. David turned to see a mass of writhing darkness, thousands of connected minds moving as one organism. The Nightmare Collective. They had consumed entire solar systems. They had been the most feared entity in galactic history, and they had just lost their title to Earth. The Council demands an explanation, the Arbiter said. How has a species so young, from a world so hostile, survived long enough to reach the stars? And more importantly, what are your intentions toward the galactic community? This was the moment David had prepared for. He had spent years studying alien psychology, learning how different species perceived threats and opportunities. He knew that most civilizations expected new species to be either submissive or aggressive. Humanity would be neither. "Thank you for this honor," David said. The chamber went silent. Several delegates made sounds of confusion. "Honor?" The arbiter's voice carried a note of surprise. "You consider being named the most terrifying planet to be an honor?" "I do," David replied, "because it means you have finally seen us clearly." He gestured, and his own holographic display activated. Images began to appear around him. A human climbing a frozen mountain. A human diving into an ocean filled with sharks. A human running through a desert where temperatures exceeded what most species could survive. "You call our world hostile. We call it home. Every challenge you listed, every threat you identified, we have faced and overcome. Not by hiding, not by fleeing, by adapting, by learning, by refusing to give up." The images shifted. Now they showed human history. Ancient hunters tracking prey across endless plains. Medieval armies clashing in brutal combat. Scientists working in laboratories, racing to cure diseases that had killed millions. You say we built weapons that could destroy ourselves. This is true. But we also built systems to prevent their use. We stood at the edge of annihilation for 50 years, and we chose not to fall. Can the Draken Empire say the same? David turned to face a delegation of massive armored beings. The Draken were the greatest military power in the galaxy. They had used their planet-killing weapons 17 times in their history. They did not respond. Can the Nightmare Collective? David turned toward the writhing darkness. The collective had devoured 3 civilizations in the last 1,000 years alone. Silence. "We did not come here to apologize for what we are," David said. "We came here to show you what we can become. You have spent millennia watching species rise and fall. You have seen empires built on fear and alliances built on weakness. But you have never seen anything like humanity." He straightened his shoulders and looked up at the assembly of the galaxy's most powerful beings. "We are not asking for your protection. We are not asking for your guidance. We are offering you something far more valuable." The arbiter pulsed with energy. "And what is that?" David smiled. In human culture, it was a sign of warmth and connection. In most galactic cultures, it was a threat display. He let them interpret it however they wished. Partnership. "We have survived everything our world could throw at us. We have survived everything we could throw at each other. Now we want to see what we can accomplish together with civilizations that have had millions of years to develop. Imagine what we could build. Imagine what we could discover. Imagine what threats we could face together instead of alone." The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates shouted at each other in 100 different languages. Some demanded that humanity be contained. Others called for immediate alliance negotiations. The Nightmare Collective withdrew into itself, processing this unexpected development, and David Webb, first human ambassador to the stars, stood at the center of the chaos and waited. He had delivered humanity's message. Now the galaxy would have to decide what to do with it. The most terrifying species in the universe had just offered to be friends. And that, David knew, was the most frightening thing of all. 3 days had passed since Ambassador David Webb's speech, and the Galactic Council had not stopped arguing. Delegations that had not spoken to each other in centuries were now forming emergency coalitions. Military commanders were reviewing defense protocols. Scientific advisors were demanding more data. And in the center of it all, humanity waited. David sat in the quarters that had been assigned to him, reviewing the latest intelligence reports from Earth's hidden observation networks. Humanity had known about the galactic community for much longer than anyone suspected. They had been watching, learning, preparing. A chime announced a visitor. David stood as the door dissolved into light, revealing a figure he had not expected. High Commander Vela of the Draken Empire stepped into the room. She was nearly 3 meters tall, covered in natural armor that could deflect most weapons fire. Her species had conquered half the galaxy through pure military might. They feared nothing until now. Ambassador Webb, Vela said. Her voice was deep and resonant, translated through the universal communication implant that all council members wore. I require answers that you did not provide in the chamber. David gestured to a seat. The furniture had been designed for multiple species, and it adjusted itself as Vela sat down. Ask whatever you wish, Commander. Your species has been spacefaring for less than 50 years. Yet your technology shows signs of development that should have taken centuries. How is this possible? David considered his response carefully. The truth would terrify her. But perhaps that was exactly what was needed. We did not develop this technology gradually, he said. We developed it because we were trying to kill each other. Vela's armored plates shifted, a sign of surprise among her kind. Explain. 70 years ago, our world was divided into competing nations. These nations entered a state of conflict that we called the Cold War. It was not fought with armies, Commander. It was fought with science. Each side raced to develop more powerful weapons, faster transportation, better communication systems. We went from our first powered flight to landing on our moon in 66 years. We developed computers, satellites, nuclear power, genetic engineering, all because we were afraid of what our enemies might develop first. You advanced through fear of your own kind? Fear is a powerful motivator for humans. It drives us to achieve things that would otherwise be impossible. But it is not our only motivator. David leaned forward. What drove you to visit me tonight, Commander? Your species has never sought private audiences with newly contacted civilizations before. Vela was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was quieter than before. The Draken Empire has maintained its position through strength. We have the largest fleet, the most powerful weapons, the finest warriors. No species has ever challenged us directly. But your presentation in the council chamber showed us something we have never seen before. And what was that? A species that does not need to challenge us directly. Your world has produced warriors who fight diseases invisible to the eye, scientists who split atoms and reshape genetics, explorers who walk into environments that would kill any Draken in minutes. You do not need warships to be dangerous. You are dangerous simply by existing. David nodded slowly. So you came here to assess the threat. I came here to understand it. Vela's massive hands rested on her armored knees. The collective has already begun withdrawing its tendrils from systems near your territory. The Vithori are offering preemptive alliance treaties. Even the precursors have taken notice, and they have not acknowledged a new species in 3,000 years. And the Draken? The Draken are debating. Some wish to destroy your world before you become more powerful. Others believe that would be a mistake. She paused. I am among the latter. David felt a cold weight in his stomach, but he kept his expression calm. Why? Because I have studied your history more carefully than my colleagues. I have seen how you respond to existential threats. When faced with extinction, you do not surrender. You do not flee. You adapt, innovate, and fight with everything you have. Vela's eyes, dark and ancient, met his. If we attacked Earth, we might destroy your cities and your fleets. But we would not destroy humanity. You would scatter across the galaxy like seeds in the wind. You would hide, rebuild, learn from your defeat. And then, in 50 years or 100 or 1,000, you would return. You think we would seek revenge? I think you would never stop seeking it. Your species holds grudges for generations. You build monuments to your defeats. You teach your children about wars that happened centuries ago. An attack on Earth would not end humanity. It would give you a purpose. And a humanity with a purpose is the most terrifying thing I can imagine. David allowed himself a small smile. You understand us better than most. I understand survival. It is what the Draken have always valued most. And your species has elevated survival to an art form. Vela stood, her massive form casting a shadow across the room. I will recommend alliance negotiations to my government. Not because I trust humanity, but because I would rather have you as allies than enemies. And if your government disagrees, then the Draken Empire is more foolish than I believed. And I suspect we would learn that lesson painfully in the centuries to come. She moved toward the door, then paused. One more question, Ambassador. Your presentation mentioned that humans deliberately seek out dangerous experiences. You climb mountains that could kill you. You swim with predators. You jump from aircraft with only fabric to slow your fall. We do. Why? David thought about how to explain something so fundamental to human nature. Because safety is not enough for us. Comfort is not enough. We need to feel alive. And sometimes the only way to feel truly alive is to come close to death. Vela made a sound that might have been a laugh among her people. My advisors said your species was insane. I told them they were wrong. Now I believe they may have been correct, but not in the way they meant. And what way is that? There is a word in the old Draken language. It describes warriors who embrace death so completely that they become impossible to defeat. They cannot be intimidated because they have already accepted the worst outcome. They cannot be broken because they have nothing left to lose. We called them the Deathless Ones. She turned to look at him one final time. Your entire species lives like the Deathless Ones. You have accepted that your world can kill you at any moment, that your own bodies can betray you, that even your own kind might destroy you. And instead of collapsing under that weight, you build civilizations. You create art. You reach for the stars. Is that why you truly came here tonight, Commander? Vela was silent for a long moment. I came because I needed to see for myself. I needed to look into the eyes of a being from the most terrifying world in the galaxy and understand what I was seeing. And what do you see? I see hope, she said quietly. And that terrifies me most of all. Because if a species from a world like Earth can still find reasons to hope, then perhaps the universe is stranger and more wonderful than the Draken ever imagined. The door dissolved behind her as she left, and David Webb sat alone in the alien silence, thinking about what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of gods and monsters. They had wanted to frighten the Council. They had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. But fear was only the first step. Now came the harder part. Turning fear into respect. Turning respect into trust. Turning a galaxy of strangers into something that might someday feel like home. David looked out the window at the endless stars and began planning his next move. The emergency session had been called without warning. Ambassador David Webb received the summons at midnight and arrived at the council chamber to find it already packed with delegates. Something had changed. The atmosphere was different now. Where before there had been fear and uncertainty, now there was something darker. Hostility. The Arbiter's voice echoed through the chamber before David could even reach the platform of judgment. Ambassador of Earth, new evidence has been presented regarding your species. You will answer for it. David climbed onto the platform and looked up at the assembly. Across from him, a figure he had not seen before stood on a floating disk of black metal. It was a precursor, the ancient species that had seeded life across the galaxy. They rarely spoke, and when they did, civilizations listened. This one was made of flowing liquid silver, constantly shifting and reforming. Its voice was like wind through ancient ruins. We have watched humanity since your ancestors first walked upright. We have observed your development with growing concern. And now we have completed a projection of your species' future trajectory. A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a timeline stretching forward from the present day. Lines and numbers filled the air, calculations so complex that most species present could not understand them. At your current rate of advancement, humanity will match Draken military technology within 200 years. You will achieve Vethori energy manipulation within 400. Within 1,000 years, you will surpass every known civilization in the galaxy. Gasps and murmurs filled the chamber. David kept his expression neutral, but his mind was racing. They had expected this information to remain hidden for much longer. And then, the precursor continued, our projections fail. We cannot calculate what humanity will become beyond that point. The variables exceed our computational capacity. This has never happened before in 10 million years of galactic observation. The Arbiter's voice cut through the growing noise. The Council recognizes the gravity of this revelation. The precursors have called for a vote on humanity's classification. What classification? David demanded. Existential threat. If passed, all Council species would be required to take immediate action to contain your development. By any means necessary. David felt the words like a physical blow. Containment. It was a polite word for what they actually meant. Blockade, isolation, and if those failed, annihilation. I request the right to speak in humanity's defense, he said. That right is granted. But know this, Ambassador. The precursors have never been wrong in their assessments. They predicted the rise of the Nightmare Collective 3,000 years before it occurred. They foresaw the fall of the Eternal Empire 500 years in advance. Their projections are considered absolute. David nodded slowly. Then he did something that made several delegates physically recoil. He laughed. Ambassador Webb, the Arbiter said, this is hardly an appropriate response to an existential classification vote. Forgive me, David said, composing himself. But I find it amusing that the most ancient and wise species in the galaxy has made such a fundamental error. The precursor shifted, its liquid form rippling with something that might have been anger. Explain yourself, human. You have predicted what humanity can become. You have calculated our potential for growth, our capacity for advancement, our probable technological achievements. And based on those numbers, you have decided we are a threat. These calculations are beyond dispute. I do not dispute them. I dispute your conclusion. David turned to address the entire assembly. The precursors have predicted what humanity can do. They have not predicted what humanity will choose to do. And that is where their analysis fails. He activated his own holographic display. New images appeared around him. Not weapons or technologies, but something else entirely. A human doctor treating patients in a disease-ravaged region. A human scientist sharing research freely with the global community. A human soldier throwing himself on an explosive device to save civilians from another country. A human firefighter running into a burning building to rescue strangers. You see us as a mathematical equation, a species with a certain level of aggression, a certain rate of advancement, a certain probability of hostile action. But we are not an equation. We are individuals. Billions of individuals, each making choices every single day. Choices are irrelevant, the precursor said. Given sufficient time, statistical probability becomes certainty. Your species will produce individuals who choose conquest. Those individuals will gain power, and your civilization will follow the same path as every other dominant species in galactic history. No, David said, we will not, and I can prove it. He pulled up a new display. This one showed a simple blue dot. Earth, as seen from the outer edge of the solar system. 47 years ago, humanity developed weapons capable of ending all life on our planet. We built enough of them to destroy Earth several times over. We pointed them at each other. And for 50 years, we stood on the edge of total annihilation. We are aware of this period. It is one of the factors in your terror index classification. But you have missed the most important part. We did not use them. We had every opportunity. We had leaders who were paranoid, irrational, desperate. We had systems that nearly launched automatically due to technical errors. We had moments when the decision to end everything rested in the hands of single individuals. David's voice grew stronger. And every single time we chose not to. Not because we could not because we were prevented. Because we looked at the abyss and decided that survival meant more than victory. That our future meant more than our hatred. He turned to face the precursor directly. You predicted the rise of the Nightmare Collective. Did you predict that they would consume 3 civilizations? Did you predict that the Draken would use their world killers 17 times? Did you predict every atrocity that your favored species would commit? The precursor was silent. You predicted capabilities. You did not predict choices. And that is your fundamental error. Humanity is not dangerous because of what we can do. We are remarkable because of what we choose not to do. The chamber had grown very quiet. Delegates, who had been whispering among themselves, were now listening intently. You ask whether humanity will become a threat. I ask you a different question. In 10 million years of observing the galaxy, how many species have stood at the brink of self-destruction and pulled themselves back? How many have developed the power to annihilate themselves and chosen restraint instead? He let the question hang in the air. We are not claiming to be perfect. We have committed terrible acts against each other. We have wars and crimes and injustices that we struggle with every day. But we also have something that your projections cannot account for. We have the capacity to recognize our own darkness and fight against it. David pointed at the image of Earth still floating above him. That small blue dot has survived everything the universe could throw at it. It has survived everything we could throw at each other. Not because humans are strong or smart or lucky. Because every generation, we find enough people who choose to build instead of destroy. Who choose to heal instead of harm. Who choose hope over despair. He lowered his hand and looked up at the precursor. You want to know what humanity will become? I cannot tell you. None of us can. Because our future is not predetermined by mathematics or probability. It is determined by the choices we make, day after day, for as long as we exist. And if you choose wrongly, then we will face the consequences. And we will make new choices. That is what humans do. We fail, we learn, we try again. We do not accept that our nature is fixed or our destiny is certain. We believe that we can become better. And we prove it, one choice at a time. The arbiter's voice filled the chamber. The precursor's assessment stands as presented. However, the human ambassador has raised questions that require further consideration. The vote on existential classification will be postponed pending additional review. It was not a victory, but it was not defeat either. David Webb stood on the platform of judgment and waited for what would come next. Behind him, 8 billion humans on a small blue planet went about their lives, unaware that their existence hung in the balance. But perhaps that was fitting. After all, humans had always lived with the possibility of extinction. It had never stopped them before. It would not stop them now. The observation vessels arrived at Earth without warning. 12 ships from 12. Different species, each one sent by their government, to verify the claims that Ambassador David Webb had made before the Council. They expected to find a primitive world clinging to survival on the edge of destruction. What they found changed everything. Commander Threll of the Vithori Science Division was the first to transmit a report. His crystalline form shimmered with confusion as he recorded his observations from orbit. The humans call this region the Amazon. It is a forest covering an area larger than most galactic outposts. Within it, there are more species of life than exist on 17 Vithori colony worlds combined. Predators, parasites, venomous creatures, plants that consume flesh. The humans have been fighting to preserve this region. They consider it valuable. His next report came from the ocean depths. I have descended into an environment with pressure levels that would crush Vithori exoskeletons instantly. The humans have sent vessels here. They call it exploration. They are mapping terrain that serves no strategic purpose, studying creatures that cannot be domesticated, simply because they want to understand. The Draken Observer, a warrior named Kroth, sent his own transmissions. I have embedded with a human military unit. Their physical training is beyond anything I anticipated. They run for hours in extreme heat. They carry weights that would incapacitate most species. They practice combat until their bodies break, then heal and begin again. When I asked why they pushed themselves so hard, one soldier told me it was because they wanted to be ready. Ready for what? The council asked. They did not know. They are always preparing for threats they have not yet encountered. They train for wars that may never come, disasters that may never happen, challenges that exist only in their imagination. This is how they live. The strangest report came from Observer Min of the Thoughtweavers, a telepathic species that had never encountered a mind they could not read. Human thoughts are chaos. Their minds contain multiple competing impulses at every moment. Fear and courage, hatred and love, despair and hope. I attempted to establish a baseline emotional state, but such a thing does not exist. They are constantly at war with themselves. Is this a weakness? The council asked. No, it is the source of their power. Because they contain all possibilities, they can choose which to act upon. A being with only one impulse has only one path. A human has infinite paths and must constantly select among them. This is exhausting. It is also what makes them unpredictable. And in conflict, unpredictability is the greatest advantage. Back at the council headquarters, Ambassador David Webb received these reports with quiet satisfaction. The observers were seeing what he had hoped they would see. Not humanity's weapons or technology, but something far more important. Their spirit. But the crisis was not over. The precursors had not withdrawn their assessment. And 3 days after the observation missions began, something happened that threatened to undo everything. A human ship fired on a collective vessel. The news spread through the galaxy within hours. A small human exploration craft, operating in contested space, had encountered a collective tendril extending toward a newly discovered system. The human captain had transmitted warnings. The collective had not responded. And when the tendril moved toward the human vessel, the captain had opened fire. The collective was damaged, but not destroyed. They immediately demanded justice. The council convened an emergency session. David Webb stood before the assembly, knowing that everything he had worked for was about to collapse. The human vessel committed an act of unprovoked aggression, the collective speaker declared. Its voice was a chorus of thousands of minds speaking in unison. This proves what we have always known. Humanity is a threat that must be eliminated. The captain acted in self-defense, David responded. The collective was approaching a system that contained signs of developing life. Your tendrils can soon developing civilizations. You have done it before. What we do with primitive species is not your concern. It is exactly our concern, because we were a primitive species not long ago. And if the collective had found Earth before we developed spaceflight, you would have consumed us too. The chamber erupted in noise. The collective's form writhed with agitation. This is speculation. You cannot justify aggression with hypothetical scenarios. Then let me offer you something concrete. David activated his display. Records show that the collective has expanded into 47 systems containing developing life in the past 1,000 years. In each case, the native species was absorbed, destroyed, erased from existence. We are a collective consciousness. Absorption is not destruction. It is unity. Did those species choose to be absorbed? Did they have any voice in their own fate? Silence. We both know the answer. The collective does not ask permission. It does not negotiate. It simply consumes. And when my people encountered your tendril moving toward another helpless world, they made a choice. They chose to fight. The arbiter intervened. The question before this council is not whether the collective's expansion practices are ethical. The question is whether humanity committed an act of aggression that justifies retaliation. Then ask yourselves this, David said. If your species had encountered the collective before developing the means to resist, would you have wanted someone to fight for you? He turned to address the full assembly. Humanity did not ask to be terrifying. We did not choose to evolve on a death world. But we understand something that many of you have forgotten. The universe is not safe. It will never be safe. And the only way to protect the things you love is to be willing to fight for them. You admit to aggression, then? I admit to protection. There is a difference. David's voice grew harder. The collective has spent millennia consuming the weak because no one stopped them. The Draken have conquered through force because no one challenged them. The precursors have sat in judgment for 10 million years while species rose and fell and died. He pointed at the assembly. You call us terrifying? Look at yourselves. Look at what you have allowed to happen under your watch. Entire civilizations erased. Entire futures destroyed. And you did nothing. We maintained balance. You maintained your own comfort. There is a difference. David stepped forward, his voice rising. Humanity is terrifying because we refuse to accept the universe as it is. We fight against death, against disease, against injustice, against the cold indifference of existence itself. We are not content to survive. We want to thrive, and we want others to thrive with us. He turned back to the collective. Your tendril approached a developing world. My captain stopped it. If that makes us aggressors, then I accept the label, because some things are worth fighting for, even if the odds are impossible, even if the enemy is vast and ancient and powerful. And if we retaliate, then we will fight you too. And maybe we will lose. Maybe you will destroy Earth and scatter humanity across the galaxy. But you will never destroy what we represent. Because the idea that the weak should be protected, that the helpless should be defended, that existence has value beyond mere survival, that idea will spread. It will infect every species that hears about what we did. And eventually, it will change the galaxy. He looked up at the assembled powers of 900 worlds. That is why you really fear us. Not because of our weapons or our aggression. Because we believe things can be better. And beliefs are the one thing you cannot contain. The chamber fell silent. The collective's form had stopped writhing. The precursors observed without comment, and in that silence, something shifted. Something that could not be measured by threat assessments or probability calculations. Something that might, in time, become hope. The arbiter spoke at last. The council will recess to consider these arguments. Ambassador Webb, you will remain available for further questioning. David nodded and stepped down from the platform. As he walked through the chamber, he noticed something he had not seen before. Delegates from a dozen species were watching him. Not with fear, not with hostility, with something that looked almost like respect. It was a beginning. Nothing more. But for humanity, beginnings had always been enough. 1 year had passed since the incident with the collective. In that time, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one, not even the precursors, had predicted. Ambassador David Webb stood once again in the council chamber. But this time, he was not alone. Behind him stood representatives from 17 human nations. Scientists, artists, soldiers, teachers. A cross-section of everything humanity had to offer. And beside them stood something unprecedented. Delegates from 34 alien species who had requested the right to speak on humanity's behalf. The Arbiter's voice filled the chamber. The Council reconvenes to deliver final judgment on the classification of Earth and the health status of humanity within the galactic community. We will hear final testimonies before the vote. The first to speak was Commander Vela of the Draken Empire. She had aged in the past year, her armor plates showing new scars. But her voice was strong. I have spent 3 decades studying warfare. I believed I understood every form of combat. Then I observed humans. She turned to face the assembly. They trained their bodies to withstand pain that would incapacitate Draken warriors. They study their enemies with obsessive dedication, searching for any weakness. They refuse to accept defeat, even when all logic says they have lost. This should make them dangerous enemies. Instead, I recommend they become our allies. On what basis? The Arbiter asked. Because the Draken have always valued strength. And we have never encountered strength like this. Not in weapons. Not in numbers. In spirit. The humans have shown us a different way to be strong. A way that does not require conquest. A way that builds instead of destroys. The next speaker was Observer Threll of the Vethori. His crystalline form sang as he spoke, translating his thoughts into words. I was sent to study Earth's biological threats. I expected to find a catalog of horrors. Instead, I found something far more remarkable. Humans share their world with millions of other species. They have driven some to extinction through carelessness, yes. But they have also spent enormous resources trying to save others. They protect creatures that serve no practical purpose. They feel grief when species disappear forever. He turned his multifaceted eyes toward the assembly. The Vethori have always believed that advanced civilizations move beyond such attachments. That caring for lesser creatures is a sign of weakness. The humans have shown us that we were wrong. It is not weakness. It is wisdom. Because a species that cares for the helpless will also care for each other. And that is the foundation of true civilization. One by one, other delegates spoke. The Void Stalkers described human art that had moved them in ways their ancient minds had never experienced. The Harvest Worlds spoke of human agricultural techniques that could increase food production across a dozen star systems. Even a small tendril of the Nightmare Collective, which had broken away from the main consciousness after the incident, testified that humans had shown it mercy when mercy was not required. Finally, the precursor delegate rose. The liquid silver being had remained silent throughout the proceedings. Now, every eye in the chamber turned toward it. We have existed for 10 million years. We have watched civilizations rise and fall. We have seeded life across the galaxy and observed the patterns that emerge. We believed we understood the shape of the universe. The being turned to face David Webb. We were wrong. A ripple of shock passed through the chamber. The precursors had never admitted error in recorded history. Our projections showed what humanity could become. They did not show what humanity would choose. And in the past year, humanity has made choices that defy every model we possess. The precursors' form shifted, expressing something that might have been wonder. They encountered a wounded collective tendril fleeing their territory. According to our models, they should have destroyed it. Instead, they offered medical assistance. They encountered Draken refugees from a civil war. According to our models, they should have turned them away. Instead, they offered sanctuary. They discovered a primitive species on a moon in their system. According to our models, they should have either ignored it or exploited it. Instead, they established protected zones and began studying how to communicate. The precursor paused. We asked humanity why they made these choices. Their ambassador gave us an answer that we have been processing ever since. The being turned to David. Share it with the council. David stepped forward. His voice carried across the vast chamber. They asked me why humans help those who cannot help themselves, why we protect the weak, why we show mercy to enemies and kindness to strangers. I told them the truth. He looked up at the assembly of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. We do it because we remember what it was like to be weak. Every human alive carries the memory of ancestors who struggled to survive in a hostile universe. We know what it feels like to face extinction. We know the terror of being small and alone in the darkness. He paused, and we decided long ago that no one else should have to face that darkness alone if we can help it. The chamber was silent. You call us the most terrifying planet in the galaxy. We accept this title, not because we are proud of our capacity for violence, but because we understand what it represents. We are terrifying because we refuse to give up. We are terrifying because we keep fighting even when we have no chance of victory. We are terrifying because we believe that life has value, that hope has meaning, that the future can be better than the past. He straightened his shoulders and spoke the words that would echo across the galaxy for centuries to come. We are not asking you to trust us. Trust is earned through time and action. We are asking for the opportunity to earn it. Send your observers. Study our world. Watch our choices. And when you have seen enough, judge us not by what we could do, but by what we actually do. The arbiter spoke. The testimony has concluded. The council will now vote on humanity's classification. David watched as 900 delegations registered their decisions. The numbers appeared on a holographic display, tallying in real time. Against containment. For integration. Against. For. Against. For. When the final vote was counted, the result was unprecedented. Humanity was granted full integration status by a margin of 712 to 188. The largest majority in council history. But there was more. The council has an additional announcement, the arbiter said. In recognition of humanity's unique position and unprecedented testimony, a new classification has been created. Earth will retain its status as the most terrifying planet, but humanity will be designated as guardians of the developing. David felt his breath catch. What does that mean? It means that the Council officially recognizes humanity's commitment to protecting species that cannot protect themselves. You will be granted authority to intervene on behalf of developing civilizations. You will serve as their defenders until they are ready to take their place among the stars. For the first time since he had arrived at the Council, David felt tears forming in his eyes. Not of sadness, of hope. On behalf of Earth, he said, his voice thick with emotion, we accept this responsibility, and we swear to honor it for as long as our species exists. The chamber erupted in a sound that David had never heard before. 1,000 different species, expressing approval in 1,000 different ways. It was chaos. It was beautiful. It was the sound of a galaxy beginning to believe that things could be different, that the universe did not have to be cold and cruel and indifferent, that terror and hope could exist. Together, that humanity's fire, which had burned so bright for so long against impossible odds, might finally light the way for others. David Webb stood at the center of the cosmos and wept, not because the journey was over, because it was finally beginning not far away, on a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. 8 billion humans went about their daily lives. They did not know that their fate had been decided. They did not know that their species had been judged and found worthy. They did not know that the galaxy now looked to them as guardians and guides, but perhaps, in some deep part of their hearts, they had always known. They were human, and humans do not go quietly into any darkness. They bring their own light.